when there's trouble in the world, money flows into dollar-denominated assets because the dollar is perceived as the one liquid currency that's still out there. And the U.S. is perceived to be the one geographic safe haven that still exists in the world. So even though we cause the trouble in the world.
You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to and watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Well, John Rubino is with us now. John, hey, strong economy. Maybe it's all those $10,000 debit cards the government is handing out to illegals. Can we get some of them?
Hey, Kerry. Well, no, you get the cheap illegal immigrant labor down there. Okay, so you benefit in that way. You can hire people and they can't complain about work conditions or anything. Yeah, there you go. But people have been trying to figure out why we haven't tipped into recession yet, because the interest rates went up to the level that should start blowing things up, and we should have fallen into a recession. And why not? And so they're coming up with reasons. And one is that the government deficit is insane. It's $1.5 trillion with unemployment at 4%. That's completely unheard of. You don't do crisis level deficit spending. But one part of the deficit is especially interesting because, like you said, that they're letting 3 or 4 million people a year come over the border illegally, and they're handing them $10,000 debit cards. And of course, the poorer you are, the faster you spend new money when it comes in, right? So they're immediately taking those debit cards and buying stuff. And that's very stimulative. So that's probably a big part of why the economy is growing, to the extent that it's growing at all. There are arguments about how valid the headline numbers are for employment and stuff like that. But the fact that we're handing out money, which is immediately spent to millions of people, probably is very stimulative. So that could explain a big part of why we're not in recession yet.
Yep, this is true. This is true. Also, I think it's flight capital from a lot of places in the world, especially China. I think that money, the flow of money in here, as witnessed by the stock market, the money's coming in. They're not buying government debt. They're pumping it into the market, especially AI stocks, right?
Well, yeah, that's another reason for the economy to be growing, is that we've got another tech bubble going on here that just came out of nowhere. Big tech stocks, the handful of them that were dominating the market, they were really high, but they weren't going straight up from the high point that they hit in the past. And then NVIDIA comes along and just spikes. It adds like a whole new Tesla in market cap in 1 year. And then all the other companies that were related in any way to AI spike too, and that helps too. So we've got these unsustainable, in many ways, very bad things going on that are temporarily floating our boat, but it won't continue. Because the $10,000 debit cards are borrowed money, so we're just increasing the deficit when we do that. And tech stocks are at a very precarious point now, so let anything happen that spooks the markets, and we could lose multiple Teslas in market cap in a heartbeat. So we're at, and interest rates are going up again in response to all this other stuff. So we still might have the higher and tighter until something breaks scenario out there that we thought wasn't going to happen after all. Well, it still might happen. So I think, as you and I have talked about over and over again, the local and regional banks are probably the epicenter when it comes, assuming that it's not the energy markets because of World War III, which is, I think that's a close second right now in terms of probability.
Yeah, it could well be the case for sure. And not to mention that the U.S. is the linchpin of the failing system. So probably whatever is going to happen, more than likely hit the U.S. financial system last.
Yeah. Martin Armstrong makes a really good point about this and has been for a long time, and he's been right about it. But when there's trouble in the world, money flows into dollar-denominated assets because the dollar is perceived as the one liquid currency that's still out there. And the U.S. is perceived to be the one geographic safe haven that still exists in the world. So even though we cause the trouble in the world,
we benefit.
That trouble sends money back into the treasury markets and to the real estate markets. Yeah. So and again, that's another thing that can't go on forever because we can't continue to stomp around the world doing what we're doing without serious blowback. And, it might easily be terrorist blowback too, because, we've let's say 3 million of the 10 million illegals we've let in have been military-age men, which means they're, capable of doing violence, and we don't know who they are or where they are. So there could be all kinds of sleeper cells out there getting ready to pay us back for what's happening in the Middle East or what's happening in Ukraine, or what we're threatening to do in China. A lot of Chinese men in their 20s have come through. And why? We don't need very many of them to have ill intent for them to be able to do something very serious. The World Trade Center thing was 20 Saudis.
Yeah.
So let's take 1 million Chinese with the same attitude and think about what they can do. It could be crazy what could happen. So that could be another thing that would derail the economy is if we have some big terrorist thing. And then there's the weird stuff that's happening. You saw the thing with the boat, of course, in Baltimore, where its power went out. And that just happened. I think it was New York. I think there was a big container ship whose power also went off just as it was heading for another big bridge. And they have tugboats there that were able to steer it out of a really destructive path. But is that some kind of cyber attack?
It certainly could be.
Well, yeah. And then you got all the Boeing planes falling apart in the sky, which just leads people to believe that we can't do very much competently anymore. It's one more thing that we're screwing up. I'm really scared to fly right now. I think
an Airbus.
I think it's kayak that allows you to eliminate planes when you're setting up your itinerary. You can rule out certain kinds of planes, and then they show you what's available without those planes to fly different places. So you can say nothing but Boeing and just take it all out. So that's the way I look at my flights from now on.
If it ain't Boeing, I'm not going. It used to be the thing. Now, if it's Boeing, I ain't going. Right?
That's good. I've never heard that before. If it's Boeing, I ain't going. Okay. Yeah. That's the headline for a Substack article right there.
Yeah. Hey, so what about gold? I mean, we're well into the 2300s with no end in sight, and silver has finally joined the party. It's almost at $28 an ounce.
Yeah, we're into that next stage where gold gets all the money first, and then the lesser precious metals or the more risky precious metals investment start getting their turn, and silver is up. The junior miners are behaving really well lately, and the big miners too, which had been just so beaten down, have had really good, like 10-day stretches here. The silver story got a little more interesting here because there was, I had two analysts saying interesting things about silver. One of them, I want to say Luke Roman, but I might be wrong about that. But he looked into the Silver Institute's silver deficit numbers. In other words, the amount by which the silver that's demanded by industrial users and investors exceeds what's coming out of today's mines.
Definitely.
But he looked at that and concluded that it's actually much bigger than the Silver Institute is saying, because solar is soaking up more silver than is reported. Okay, which is, if that's true, that means that's a big deal because the deficit is even bigger. And then I should have written down who these came from, because it was then an analyst with a big brokerage house came out and said that the amount of above ground silver that's available to offset this ongoing structural deficit is actually much smaller than anybody thought. He said it gets soaked up in 2 years. So imagine 2 years from now.
It could be a lot faster than that. Hey, and then Bitcoin's back. It's nearly 72,000. To me, that 75,000 is when it does the next breakout.
That, technically that does make sense. And so Bitcoin is, right now, every safe haven, anything is attracting a lot of capital. And Bitcoin is still a relatively small market in terms of market cap and in terms of available coins, because a lot of the holders are the big whales, the big original Bitcoin guys. Like Michael Saylor is not selling into this spike. Mm-hmm. In fact, he's probably borrowing money to add more.
600 million? Didn't he borrow 600 million to buy Bitcoin?
Recently, yeah. But it was probably at a lower price than this, but wouldn't be a surprise if he just borrowed another billion and bought more. But that means that, Bitcoin is a lot like silver in that sense. There really isn't that much free Bitcoin out there that's available. And if new capital comes in, it can have an outsized price impact. And I think we're seeing that now. And, in bubbles, in desperate, crazy markets like what might be coming, you see these just unprecedented, undreamed of price spikes. And you can see that with Bitcoin. You can see that with silver. And you could see that with the junior miners in precious metals. So if the worst case scenarios in some of these aspects that we've been talking about actually start to play out, and I think the numbers that we're going to see and the trajectories that we're going to see for a lot of safe haven assets just be amazing. There's no guarantee that we don't just settle all this stuff right away. Maybe Russia and Ukraine settle things, and Israel pulls back from Gaza and they start talking again, and things kind of cool down a little bit. But right now, it doesn't look like that's happening. Because did you see the latest that France has decided to send like 60,000 soldiers to Ukraine?
Like, who thought that was a good idea, huh?
Oh my God, that, and Russia's saying, well, we'll kill them if they come, which they totally can do. I don't know what 60,000 French soldiers are going to do against the entire Russian army that's right there on the border. So anyhow, that means NATO members start dying. Mm-hmm. Which is the kind of the geopolitical nightmare scenario. And the guys running the U.S., the neocons who are in charge of the U.S., who are therefore in charge of NATO, seem to want this. They seem to, and they're setting things up specifically so NATO soldiers are killed en masse by Russian artillery and Russian hypersonic missiles and Russian soldiers just shooting them. If they want what comes next, and I just can't imagine why they do.
Insane.
But they have a plan. They got a plan, though, Kerry. They want something out of all this, and it could just be that they want to get rid of all the breeders out there, And if we do something, if we have a die-off of 3 billion people because of a nuclear war, that solves some of what they consider to be their problems. And that it might be as simple as that they need a mass die-off. But I don't know. I just hope the first nuclear weapon hits the underground bunker of one of the neocons, like Hillary Clinton or somebody like that, just vaporize first. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, they certainly have it coming, don't they?
For trying to start World War III, what you have coming for that is not just death. It should be so much worse than death for what these guys are doing. And by the way, I'm not saying anybody who's listening to this should go out and try to kill neocons. Don't do that.
We don't really want this. We really want everybody to get along and for peace to break out all over the world, and nobody, even the people who deserve to suffer the consequences of their actions, we don't really want that to happen because the alternative is so bad, right?
That's right. And we don't want anybody who hears this to feel compelled to go out and make any of that happen, right? So we're talking about peace here, and mad at the people who are making it hard to achieve peace.
Don't want it, man.
Yeah.
Just don't freaking want it.
They do not seem to want it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, interesting times are happening. We're living in interesting times. We talk interest rates heading back up. That's going to further put pressure on the regionals and the community banks. The government is now acknowledging that some of them are not going to be with us. Mnuchin is out there trying to roll up all these failing banks and recapitalize them because he sees an opportunity, so he thinks, right?
Yeah. There's an upside for the banking industry, which is basically dominated by 6 big banks and a bunch of hedge funds and private equity guys. If there's a banking crisis, because the government could step in and bail everybody out, but that scares them because what it'll do to inflation and the dollar and everything. Mm-hmm. So they prefer it if JP Morgan Chase just goes in and buys 12 worst off local and regional banks and just folds them into their empire at a massive profit, and that a few other big banks do the same thing, and that solves the problem. Because it could well be that in the same way that World War III is serving the interests of a certain group of elites, that a giant banking crisis would serve the interests of another group, the banking elites, because then they get to, first of all, eliminate a bunch of competition and then buy up all the customers and the assets of their dying competition at really nice, profitable rates. So they make money and they accumulate power if there's a big banking crisis. So it could be that rising interest rates lately have been also part of a plan, because we interest rates didn't rise enough to completely break the banking system last time around, but maybe they will this time, because what happened with the 10-year Treasury yield went from a low of 3.8% or something like that up to 4.4 or so percent right now. Now that means that the bonds on the balance sheets of local and regional banks went down in value by a commensurate percentage.
Yes.
And it also means that a lot of commercial real estate that was unprofitable before just became much less profitable because they're going to have to refinance at higher rates, which also hurts the local and regional banks. So, it could be a plan. It could be something that is going to result in a banking crisis and then a massive bailout, big buying small. And then that's the way these guys want it. So,
hey, there's a theory out there, and I don't necessarily subscribe to it, but it is attractive, and some might even call it a conspiracy theory, is that periodically the banks and the powers that be crush the economy, put all these lesser entities into insolvency, and then they go and snap up their assets at pennies on the dollar, and then watch their profits grow. And Blackstone, you've seen it with them, with the housing crash in 08, 09. You saw it during the Great Depression, where the big banks snapped up a lot of the business from the failed banks. And you see it regularly.
Well, a writer named Naomi Wolf, I think, wrote a book called Disaster Capitalism, right? Is that the right author?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Anyhow, and that's what she was saying in that book, is that we've evolved to a point where the economy is run via disasters, because that's, first of all, it's an excuse for the big to get bigger. It's also an excuse for the government to ease monetary policy, which is what they really want, because it enriches the already rich. So government gets bigger. The weakest companies who are hurt by whatever disaster it is get gobbled up or just destroyed by the big competition. And then we go on to the next one, and we have done that ever since 2000, right? Oh, yeah. Really, yeah. 1990, when the junk bond bubble burst, and then the tech stock bubble burst, and then the housing bubble burst. In each of those cases, there was a gigantic crisis. Big players stepped in, bailed out a lot of the weaker players at massive profits, and they got bigger and they got more powerful. So yeah, there's no reason to think why the next thing that's coming isn't just part of the same repeating cycle, because it's worked so well for the aristocracy in the past. There's no reason to think that they won't keep trying it till it breaks. And it could be that, okay, I'm not saying do this again, okay? to listeners, but it could be that we need some kind of French Revolution solution to this, where the peasants just won't put up with it anymore, and they find a way to destroy the aristocracy. I don't know how that plays out exactly, but it could be that that's the dynamic that is required to stop this whole thing.
All right. Well, hey, it seems to be a big game, but it seems to be one that they never tire of, and I have a feeling this time will be no different. But if there's really this dollar collapse that happens, John, what happens to all the mortgages and the debt that the banks are owed? I think in Weimar Germany, they didn't get rid of those mortgages either. Like, I remember reading, and you'll never find this on any internet search, that in the run-up to Weimar Germany's collapse, the inflation was so high that the creditors were actually hiding from their debtors because the debtors were trying to pay off all their debts in inflated marks. And oh, wow, it's getting dark out here. I think the eclipse is finally starting to take hold here in Florida. It got really dark out.
Whoa.
But it's cloudy. But, basically, will we see a repeat of that where the banks just shut their doors and refuse to take any payments from their borrowers because they know they're going to get some kind of bailout in the new system that emerges?
Well, probably what they'll end up doing, because the big banks are at risk from this. They are owed a lot of money, and if their customers are going to try to pay them back in collapsing currency, that's not good for them. So probably what they'll do is index all contracts to inflation. So your mortgage is $2,000 a month now, but the dollar drops by half and your mortgage goes up to $4,000 a month in depreciated currency.
Right.
So that's, that you would think would set the peasants off to grab their pitchforks and head to the county. Because that's one of the reasons a lot of people borrow is because they expect to be able to pay off their debts in depreciated currency. But if the currency goes down, but your loan payments go up, and the government, let's say, tweaks it so that your real cost of your loan payments actually goes up rather than down, then I don't know. Then it stops being a good deal for the borrowers who thought it would be a good deal.
Hey, that's called heads they win, tails you lose, right?
Mm-hmm. That is what it's called, disaster capitalism, Kerry, right? Now we have a currency crisis. That's a disaster. But we fiddle around with contracts so that the big guys actually end up winning.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised.
Nothing surprises me at this point. So did you see, like, there's a nationwide epidemic of squatters taking over homes, even when people are just away for a couple of days? And Florida passed a law against it that basically says you call the cops and they have to throw the person out. I mean, what's going on here?
It's funny because my wife and I were talking about starting the snowbird thing, where we head south for the winter and then come back up here. But in a world of squatters, that's not a really good thing to do, right? You don't want to go about 3 months. And so that kind of, that made us reevaluate our strategy. But I got to say, I love your governor. He should have never run for president. He should have stayed in Florida and just been an awesome governor. Because the minute the squatter thing hit the news, he just comes out with a new law that does away with squatters' rights in Florida, and boom, problem solved. I love that guy.
There shouldn't be any squatters' rights. But here, I thought of a novel application for our new law here. You've got these millennials and these Zoomers, and they won't leave your house. You can't get rid of them. So you call the cops up and you say, this person is squatting in my home. I want them gone. And then the cops come and they throw your kid out. I mean, is that great?
See, that works where you are. That works in Florida. But if you try that in California, the cops would come and throw you out and leave your kids there as the legitimate owners of the house now, So we should be careful what we ask for, or like all things, know what state you're in before you do something.
Hey, it's like there are basically 57 countries that comprise the United States of America. all right, 50 states, and then a bunch of possessions that have their own laws, like Puerto Rico and Guam and Micronesia and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and they all have their own set of laws, and that's the laboratory of democracy. But I think Dr. Frankenstein has run amok here.
You mean in terms of states' rights or
passing their own laws? Every state has its own court system, its own set of laws that are supposed to be, if they're not specifically preempted by the Constitution, the state's laws are supposed to be supreme, but we all know how that's working out.
Well, but Kerry, that's how we find out what doesn't work. So we know not to try it at the national level. So it's,
this way. I have a better way of finding out what doesn't work. Just look at blue states, see what they're doing, see their results, and then you know exactly what doesn't work, right?
That's exactly my point. Now, let's say Gavin Newsom, if he was president, he would impose California-style governance on the whole country.
Yeah.
But he will never be president because we can see what happened in his state. So it's working. The whole laboratory of democracy thing is working really well. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you hear Trump's new name for Newsom? He called him Gavin Newscum.
Trump is crushing it lately. This is just, you would think that, a normal person would just be in an insane asylum after all the stuff he's had to go through and all the money fines he's had. But he's just, he's cooking right along. He stands on the courthouse steps and makes his speeches. And then one of his companies goes public and he's worth $3 billion. So he is a, lucky's not the right word necessarily, but he did a deal with some supernatural entity, angel and demon. I don't know, but things are working for him in ways that you wouldn't have expected.
Well, right now, DJT, Trump Media and Technology Group, and we pointed this out last time, by the way, but right now its market cap is $5 billion. We pointed it out. You made the observation that this is a meme stock and it enables all these people who wouldn't otherwise contribute or have to make a disclosure to contribute. They could just buy the stock and help bid it up. And my guess is we haven't seen anything yet. Just like Bitcoin's at 72,000. This could, for no reason whatsoever, certainly not based on fundamentals, this thing could be worth $1 zillion. I mean, it opened today at 41.45. Right now, it's at 36.65. But hey, there's 100 million shares out there, 125 million shares. There's only slightly more DJT shares, like 5 times more than there are Bitcoins out there, right?
Yeah, I'm hearing from people on Substack. They're emailing me and saying, "Hey, how do I buy Trump's stock?" So that they don't know what the company does. They just heard he had stock. Yeah, they just want to be part of a movement. And I was actually thinking about buying one share and then trying to get the certificate so I could frame it. It would just be kind of a cool thing on the wall
before it goes out of business,
or before it goes to $1 trillion.
Yeah, that it will merge with the U.S. government. Or maybe Elon Musk will take it over for the heck of it, right?
Well, that would be a hilarious troll, right, for Elon Musk. If somebody on the other side of the aisle messes with him in some way that annoys him, he could just go out and buy Trump's company for $10 billion, which to Elon Musk is not that big of a hit. Yeah. And so all of a sudden Trump is worth $7 billion or something like that, and Elon Musk will get to tweet about it. He'll get the shit post. Yeah. He might consider that to be worth it,
Hey, just to see the reaction to it, it could be worth it.
Can you imagine? You would have to have reporters, cameras on Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi when it's announced. That would be.
I got it. It's like he merges it with Twitter, now known as X, and the ticker symbol is either XDJT or DJTX.
Oh,
man.
that has a ring to it. Yeah,
It does.
Hey, now, maybe he hasn't thought of it yet, and he's going to see this video and
I'll send it to him.
And and then he'll thank us on X. That'll be cool.
Hey,
Yeah.
by the way, I just wanted to bring this up, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but I had Daryl Schoon on before. You know Daryl, right?
Sure.
You met him before. And, I thought it was a pretty good interview. Daryl's really, he's interesting. But the thing for my channel, considering how throttled I am by our digital overlords, the thing took off. I got it's up to 7,200 views, and I just posted it last night, and it hasn't even hit my other channels yet.
Well, somebody big picked you up.
Yeah, and the headline was one reason why. Well, I have a couple of headlines for it, but one reason why the collapse is near, and the other one is one reason why the current economic system is about to die, right? And good headline.
Good headline.
Good headline, but when you're throttled, you're throttled. But maybe my digital re-education, my stint in the digital re-education camp is starting to bear fruit, John.
Well, yeah, maybe you're breaking out of YouTube prison here. That would be cool.
Yeah.
Kerry, you should be on Rumble anyhow. You should you should set up there, because there are people getting pretty good traffic there. All right, great.
I'm gonna
Great Hunter
there.
Greg Hunter gets 100,000 plus views over on Rumble. So
that's pretty good. That's what I used to get before. I offended our digital overlords at that particular platform. But hey, I'm not complaining here, because it's really made no difference in my life. Yeah, I'd love to have my videos go viral again. The two biggest ones I ever did, I did an interview with Chris Wayne, and it was entitled, Is the U.S. About to Bomb Iraq? Iran, rather. Is the U.S. about to bomb Iran? And that got hundreds and hundreds of thousands. And the other one was my own original work, is why are the hedge fund managers selling their Greenwich mansions? Because there was over 150 Greenwich mansions for sale in the early 2010s. That one, I don't even know how much it got. I can't even find it anymore. So I know that the message is one that people respond to, but if they don't get it, there's no way to respond to it, right?
Yeah. I don't know how that works, but you hear about it a lot. So it's definitely a thing,
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, that is it. And speaking of Substack, you find John's prolific work at rubino.substack.com. And the link is in the show notes to this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Make sure you sign up for your free newsletter. Got one coming out really soon with Daryl's work at the top. And hey, question for John, myself, put it down on the YouTube comments below, or shoot me an email, kl@kerrylutz.com. John, we'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Kerry. See ya.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.